And good morning, everybody. Welcome. Steve, we are so honored to have you here and for you to share your wisdom with all of us. I just want to share some logistics with everybody before we get started. So, if everyone can use the chat to be chatty and write comments throughout the session, that is perfect. But as you think of any questions throughout the session, please do put them in the Q&A panel. We'll ask those towards the end of the session, so that'll be easier to find if they're all in one place. But Darryl and Steve, take it away.
All right. Thank you very much, Sarah. Good morning. Good afternoon, where everybody is. Welcome to this incredibly important. This is an important interview for me because Steve Baird of Baird Warner is a company that I hold dear in my heart. When I first started my training program, the Power Agent Coaching Program, back in the 90s, Baird Warner was one of the first companies to give me a shot at something that was still in its creation stages. And we had a long relationship after that. But again, Steve, as I said earlier, thanks for making a difference in my life by giving me that chance. Yeah.
Well, it was a great program, so we were happy to do it.
Thank you, sir. So I wanted for people who may not be aware of you, like this is huge. Who Baird and Warner is in the industry. So I want to give everybody just a little intro. First of all, you're fifth generation owner, Steve, of the company. You are the oldest real estate company in Illinois, founded in 1855. But my newest research found that before it was Baird and Warner, it was called LD Olmsted and Company, and your company plus I think another one helped create the Chicago Real Estate Board, which was the beginning of NAR. So that's like I just found that out, and I think that's incredible. So
So a couple of clarifications there. We are the oldest real estate company in the United States, and we are also the oldest family-owned business in Chicago.
okay, thanks for clarifying that. And where I think in generations, I don't have my facts on this, but being that you're fifth generation, like that puts you in a whole other category of generational, not just real estate companies, but companies in general. And I can't remember my stats. I remember doing it for the Kai's company, Mike Pappas, but it was impressive. And I think you've got one more generation on him. So you're in that special group. Let's see. You're chairman of the Realty Alliance, educated at Harvard, which is very intimidating to me because I only went to CW Post College and I was a thespian and it was only for a year. So, let's see. You've survived the Civil War, the Great Chicago Fire. Just incredible background. And how many agents and offices do you have at this point?
So we have about 2,500 agents. In terms of brokerage offices, about 30.
Okay.
And then we have about 10 other offices, which are mortgage, title, closing offices, corporate headquarters, that kind of thing. So a total of 40, and almost all of them are in Chicago. We actually have one in Green Bay and one in Florida
Okay.
for all sorts of odd reasons.
You know what? You're not the only company that I talked to that they're here and here. And then, by the way, we have one in Florida.
Yeah.
I don't know why that is. I think every owner wants to like maybe think about retiring, or I think it's a lot of states. New York is an example. If it wasn't for our states, Florida would still be swampland because that's where everybody moves to retire.
Yeah.
Okay, so let me just do one thing before I get to our questions. So on this call today, which is happening live, we've got two groups of people. We have Brokers and Managers and Leaders Association, so we are glad that they're here listening in. But we also have real estate agents. And what I want to say just to the agents that are on the call is that even though this is a leadership interview about being a broker and what that means and visions and all that stuff, I want you to still listen through the ears that you're your own business within your brokerage. So a lot of what we'll share, what Steve will share, will apply to you if you think of yourself as your own business owner. So with that said, Steve, so I wrote these questions down, so I don't want to get them wrong. When you first stepped into the leadership, Did that history, because given that it's been around so long, did it feel more like a foundation or a weight on your shoulders?
Well, the way I thought about it at the time was, what is the name? What does it mean? We're very proud of the history, obviously, but I think about it as looking forward. So, we're very proud of that history and everything, but you got to be looking forward.
Mm.
So what does that name mean? It's both a legacy and we have a great name, but it's also a little bit of a burden because there is a connotation that we're old and we're, not progressive and all that kind of thing. So it's actually both. So there are times when I think, wow, it'd be great to just start from scratch. And then there are other times when, I was handed a really great asset, and it needed work at the time. And so, you take what you get and you work on it and build on it. And that's been the focus.
I've got to ask this. This wasn't in my original questions to ask you, but it just popped in my mind. You've had to have had offers over the years, over the generations from other companies or franchises, and why not? Why not sell and have a payday? Why not join merge with another company that wanted to take over or a franchise?
Well, a couple things. I've had offers to buy the company. I've had offers for me to run parts of bigger companies, all that sort of things. And, I made a couple of decisions. One was I didn't want to manage a company that where I walked into an office and I didn't know anybody.
Mm.
And I didn't really want to, I'm a tried and true Chicagoan. I love Chicago. I don't want to be hopping on a plane and flying to wherever. That just wasn't that interesting to me. And it is one of the reasons we developed a strategy of horizontal expansion more than vertical. So that was one thing. And the other thing is that I've tried to describe to people, and it's really hard unless you understand kind of the long-term legacy of the company, which is, we're building something that's multi-generational and have been building it, and the company has evolved over a long period of time. Very different what my dad ran and my grandfather ran. And so we're interested in building it and making some changes and really how do we make things better. And so selling was never really an issue for us. And it's really hard in today's world where, we live in this very capitalistic society
Mm.
where everybody thinks you build it and then you sell it. And I
Right.
have lots of friends who have done that and very successfully, and they talk to me and they actually come to me and say, "Oh, you should sell your company." And it's hard for me to describe to them whether that's not really ever been a thought process. I'm in a lucky position, I think, that I don't want to say I don't need the money because, whether the company survives or doesn't survive isn't going to really change my life. So it's not about, you know, doing a bigger pile. I'm more interested in what can we do to actually change the business, to really have an impact on the business. And so my focus really has been, when I made a decision when we first started the company, when I first took over the company in the early 90s, we were in the commercial businesses. We were in the commercial mortgage business, commercial brokerage business, commercial management business, and we were a player in those businesses. But they were all consolidating. And I made a decision to get out of those businesses. I sold those businesses
Oh, okay.
and mostly to our employees. And because I just felt that, and at that time, we were a very unusual company to be in both businesses. And people talk about the real estate business, but there's really two real estate businesses. There's the residential brokerage business and related businesses, which we're in right now. and there's commercial.
Mm-hmm.
And they're totally different businesses. They have
Yes.
different people, different capital structures, different everything. We're kind of in both. And so I decided we're going to move out of the commercial business, which ironically was the original business of the company going way back. So I
Oh,
sold,
really?
yeah,
Okay.
I sold our commercial mortgage business to two guys who worked for me. And at that time, we had been in that business for 140 years. And my grandfather probably rolled over in his grave in 1997 when I did sell that business. So, we have sold, you know, businesses. So, and then I decided to double down on the brokerage business. And my thing was at that point, I looked at the real estate transaction and said, you know what? This is a crazy, complicated, stressful transaction. And at that time, there was a lot of evolution going on and making things simpler. So, how do we do that in the residential transaction? Because people, our customers really don't understand what we're doing. They don't understand all the paperwork. They have to sign everything. They don't, I'm sure they all read everything, and it's super complicated. It's super complicated. And how do we make that simpler? And the model that I kind of got onto at that time was what happened in the auto industry at that time. Now, people don't even remember it so long ago, but at that time, when you went and buy a car, you went to a bank to get financing. You went to somebody else who cut a hole in your roof to put in a sunroof. You had aftermarket stereo systems.
Yep.
You Z-Bart, if you remember Z-Bart.
Yes, yes. We're
Roofing,
showing our age now. Some people don't know what the heck we're talking about, but go
yeah,
ahead.
exactly, exactly. But what happened was um, the auto industry, sort of led by Lexus, but there were a bunch of Japanese companies that basically came in and said, no, we're going to put that all together. So what do you have today? Today, when you drive into a dealership, your expectation is when you get out of your car and you go inside, you're going to buy a new car and you're going to walk outside and you're going to get in the new car and you're going to drive away.
Mm-hmm.
And they're going to do everything. They even take all the crap that's in your trunk and put it in your new car. Okay. And you expect them to do the financing, to do the title work, to do everything.
Right.
And you want them, and by the way, you want them to do it fast.
Right.
You want to screw in. You don't, and that's the standard that's there today. So why can't we do that in the brokerage business? Why do we have to make it so difficult for
Mm-hmm.
customers? Because really, all buyers want to do, they just want to buy a house. They
Mm-hmm.
don't care about attorneys or title or mortgage or anything. What do I need to do to get my house? And the seller's the same thing. What do I need to do to sell my house? I want to make it as easy as possible. And just for historical reasons, and I can get into the philosophy around this, why it's evolved this way, we as an industry have done a terrible job of doing this. Now,
Mm-hmm.
build in all the holes and we make the transaction happen. And it is a little better today than it was 10 years ago, 20 years ago, but it's still not where it should be.
Mm-hmm.
Uh,
Yeah.
and so that, I guess, has been my bigger goal. My goal is, and that's why I got in these other businesses. That's why I decided, we need to expand horizontally and we need to control these
So
businesses.
you sold the other businesses because it was perhaps more of a distraction from where you wanted to put the focus of the company.
Well, two things. Yes, a distraction. And for a while I did it. I would spend part of my day working on the commercial mortgage business and part of my day working on the residential brokerage business. And what I realized was there were people on both sides of that business. Uh, you know, on the commercial mortgage business, there were people that worked 100% of their time, and I
Mm-hmm.
was only able to put 50% of my
Mm-hmm.
time.
Mm-hmm.
And the same thing on the other side. And so I really, they weren't, even though they both had the name real estate or mortgage in them,
Mm-hmm.
they were totally different businesses.
Mm-hmm.
And so there wasn't really any crossover. So I just decided, it was too hard to do that. It
Got
was
it.
like standing on two pontoons that are
Sure.
going up and down.
Yeah, yeah.
Let's focus on what we're doing. At that time, we were not in the residential brokerage business. We were not in the title business. We were not in the insurance business. Um, so I stripped us down to, at that point, we were only in the residential brokerage business.
Okay.
And then we started building it up from there. So that was the thought process about it. Maybe it was because it made my life easier. I don't know, but it was just too hard to like think on these two parallel planes. Maybe I'm not smart enough or something. I
Oh
don't know.
yeah, I doubt that. Now, you did say something before we got into this. Going back to the question about selling it, or why didn't you sell it, have a payday, or join a franchise? And before we started this, you talked about the generation of even the agents that work for the company, that you don't see this as you have a connection to the agents that work for you with you. Talk a little bit about that.
Well, we're a family business, and people think about the family business as only at the ownership level.
Mm,
But that's not the case. We have a lot of multi-generational people families who have worked for the business.
hmm
Some of them three generations that worked with my father and me, just yesterday, one of our people brought in her daughter, who is working there for the summer, but it's the same idea, and it's part of the ideals of the company that we are a family business. And so, you know, I don't know other businesses because I really haven't worked there. I read about them and stuff, but no, that's part of our thought process is that we're a family,
mm,
and people are important to us. And so that's why, for example, we have a lot of people who have worked for us for a really long time. I get a list every month of the people that have their anniversaries, and we always have, every month we have 15 to 20 people who have worked for us for 10 years or more.
wow.
And last month there was a person who's been working for us for 33 years. So and that's not unusual.
Mm,
Uh, and again, like what you asked the question, I view that as both good and bad. It's good because people are loyal and they love the company and they're committed to the company. But also, we need to also continually regenerate. We need to, continue to innovate, to bring new people, new ideas in. So it's a combination of those two things.
Now, when it comes to that family feel, is there something how does that show up in the management style? Um, as far as strategies, perhaps, like, is there acknowledgments of people based on their tenure or family events, anything like that?
Not really. I
Okay.
mean, people are committed to the bill. The way I say it, and we have this, we talk about it as the Baird Warner way, or they are Baird Warner people.
Mm,
And so that's something we talk about internally, and it's about how you treat other people,
mm-hmm,
that you're fair and you're nice, and it's
mm-hmm.
a friendly environment, and it's positive, and all those kind of things. And I had a really unique experience many years ago, maybe 20 years ago, where a group of senior people came to me. There was maybe 10 of them, and they wanted a meeting with me. And so I met with them, and they basically called out a senior executive, for several of them, a senior boss.
Okay.
And they said to me, and this is a quote, "He is not a Baird and Warner person."
Wow.
And I thought, wow, first of all, a bunch of these people were literally risking their job to do this. And two, they had such a feeling about what we were,
Yes.
and this person, and as I got into it, what I realized was this person was really good at one thing, and that was convincing me that they were really good. and the company, and these employees came to me and said, no, this person is not that kind. And as I investigated, they were right. They
Wow.
were right, and over a period of time, I made a change. So there is, people talk about that. And, here's another weird stat that I mentioned. I have 4 times fired the number one agent in the company because same idea. They were not a Baird and Warner person. They were not supportive of the company. They were, there's lots of reasons,
Yeah,
but
sure.
and I also realized that I had to do that because a manager, that's really hard for them to do because those people are producing a lot of revenue and it puts a hole in their budget and they're very reluctant to do that. But it's the same thing. I remember one of them came to me and said, basically, it's me or the manager. And I said, fine, clean out your desk.
Wow.
Because the manager was a really good manager and been with us a long time, and there wasn't a question there. So I think it's about setting that. Now, those standards are not as simplistic as just it's a warm feeling and everybody's happy and all that. No, it is a positive environment, but it's also a competitive environment. And it's we want to be good, we want to win, we want to be successful. That's important to that too. You have to have both of those things. And one of the things I do is I go around to offices on a regular basis, and I can walk in, and within 5 minutes of walking in the office, you can feel it. And you've had the same experience where you walked into a place and hey, you feel the positive energy.
Yep.
And you also note the opposite, where you walk in a store or an office or something, and it's just dead.
Yes.
There's no energy.
Yep.
And I describe it as positive energy where people are upbeat and they like each other and they're talking to each
Hmm.
other. There's just a positive energy. And when I go into an office, and this is almost all of our offices, we have a positive energy. And when there's a positive energy there is a huge high correlation that that's a successful office.
Hmm.
That people want to be there. Because I also think, and this is, I don't know why other companies don't think this, but I've heard they don't. Um, I want it, I want it not only to be a successful company, but I want this to be a place where people want to be here.
Hmm.
I want them to want to work here. And that's why if somebody comes to me, and it does happen, and they come and say, I want to go to somewhere, I say, listen, if you don't want to be here, then you should not be here.
Hmm.
Uh, that's your choice. And we're a big company. That happens
Yeah,
from
sure. It
time.
happens to everybody. Yeah.
It's not for everybody. And some people just don't like that kind of environment. So for example, it's like why we've never purchased a Remax company because of the culture. There's such a
Hmm.
difference in culture. And there are really successful Remax companies, but it's such an individualistic. You go into a Remax office, they're all closed doors.
Hmm.
We don't have any closed doors in our company. And
Yeah, it's
actually,
interesting you said that because Carpenter Realtors, David, when I interviewed him, the same thing is that they pay attention to the culture if they're going to absorb a company or purchase a company. They're and, oh, and another one too. It's actually a Remax broker, but he has 55 offices. Same thing. He looks at the character of the people
yeah.
as the first priority and whether to buy that company or not.
Well, just some little things like we, I'm sure we have a few of them, but we have almost no offices where they we put a glass panel next to every office. So even if you're in there, and there are times when you need to be in there and close the door, but people can see in there.
Mm.
And that's just, I don't want to have a closed door. You don't know what's going on in there. Now, we do have that for HR issues and stuff like
Sure,
that. We
sure.
have occasionally, but we design our offices so that because I also don't want to have, the agents in that office on either side of that door feel like they're not part of the office.
Yes.
And that's a physical thing. But, we've tried to design that into our offices.
Nice, nice. Let me ask you, when you were who was it that groomed you? Was it your dad? Like who groomed you to take the mantle over? And my other question with that is, during those early years, what would you say is a characteristic that you were taught, a leadership principle that helped you in stepping into this position?
Well, that's an interesting question. I was thinking about that. And when I came back to the company, my dad and I sat down and we kind of roughly designed a 10-year program of me to work in different businesses and learn the business.
Okay.
Uh, and which I did. I didn't quite make the 10 years. I got to about 8
Okay.
before I moved into a leadership position. And I moved around and the first business I worked in was managing shopping centers, actually.
Oh,
Um, and I learned from those different people. And my father was a wonderful guy. I was very close to my father. We worked together for 35 years, and I would still consider him one of my best friends.
oh,
He was very much interested in different things. He wasn't really as much focused on building the business. I was more interested in that than he was. So we had a
okay.
little bit different, not a negative thing. He was very interested in what he referred to as urban renewal, but historical rehabs and changing neighborhoods. And he did a lot of that kind of stuff. He sat on the Chicago Landmarks Commission for 45 years.
Nice.
He was very interested in that kind of stuff and not particularly that interested in. He had hired a guy named Bob Walters, who I think you may know, who ran our brokerage operation, and he just let him run it.
Okay.
And I was more focused on building the business than he was. So it was interesting because when I started getting more involved, he was delighted about that because he didn't really want to do that.
Okay.
Now, my dad was an iconic figure. Everybody loved my dad. He was a wonderful man, and people still miss him. He's been gone for quite a while now, but so it was a number of different people in a number of different areas. Um, and then the other question was, what was the one thing I learned?
Yeah.
Well, listen, there's a lot of things, but one of the ones I learned was even even good people don't fit. And meaning that I hired some people who are really good, great reputations or whatever, but they just didn't fit into our culture.
Okay.
And one of the characteristics that I have in terms of managing the company is, generally speaking, I like to hire really good people and let them do their job.
Mm.
And so I'm not a micromanager at
Mm-hmm.
all.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the things I've realized is everybody wants that kind of relationship, but very few people can actually do it.
Mm.
And I learned
Mm.
good people, everybody comes in and says, "Oh, I don't want to be micromanaged." But the reality is most management people, they want to know, okay, what's the program? Where am I going? Am I on the right track? And then they'll go. But if you leave them with a blank sheet of paper and say, go build this business, very few people can do that.
Mm.
And I learned that. And so some good people came and they kept looking to me to, which way do you want to go?
Right.
And
Right.
I was saying no, because what I tell people also is I am the least experienced person in our company in any part of the company. Okay, so there is somebody, no matter what part of the company it is, whether it's an agent or in the mortgage business or whatever, there are multiple people who know more about the business than I do. I'm a generalist. I've never sold residential real estate. I did do a little bit in the commercial mortgage area, but I've never done any of that stuff,
Mm,
which is an unusual thing for somebody like me. In a lot of cases, people came up and they were an agent and then they were a manager. And
right.
then, yeah, I never did that. I never did that. And I actually view that as a positive because I don't have the baggage of, oh, that's the way we did it. And we always need to do it. And today, more than ever, the business is changing.
Yeah.
And the people that are really struggling or will struggle going forward are the older agents because they've been successful at doing it a certain way, and it's not so much that way anymore. And
Right.
they're having problems. The younger agents, they can adapt to new technologies or new
Right.
way of doing business or social media or whatever it is, much easier.
Yeah,
Uh,
I'm seeing more the mature agents in our industry that, they get worried comparing themselves to the younger kids, thinking I got to do TikTok video and I don't know that, and so they get intimidated by it. Yeah.
oh yeah,
Um.
and it's not their thing. Their clients are just like them. Their
Exactly.
clients
Yes.
aren't doing TikTok videos or watching TikTok videos. They just need to realize, what do my clients want? How do they want to communicate? And it's probably not TikTok. If
Right.
you're 5 years old, um, I tell agents, when I talk to them, you need to figure out how to relate to your clients.
Right.
Do you want to meet in person? Do you want to do TikTok videos? Do you want texting? There's so many ways today. Do you want me to call you on the phone? If I do call you on the phone, should I not call after 6 o'clock?
Well,
Whatever.
there's something that the mature agent has that the younger kids don't have, and I'm trying to get them to hear that message more and more so they get the confidence they should have, and that is they have life experience. I mean,
Yeah,
they had the kids or even the grandkids or the jobs and the COVID. Like they have something that younger agents don't have where they can relate and bring that experience to the relationship with their buyers and sellers.
yeah.
So yeah.
Because I mean, at the bottom line, good agents, yes, they need to know about real estate, they need to know about the process, all that, but the best agents are really good with people.
Mm,
Understand people, they understand how to communicate, they understand how to read them, all that stuff. Okay. And that is a lot of learned experience. And I would take an agent who had good interpersonal skills and knew nothing about real estate over some high tech, I can do great searches, blah, blah, whatever,
right.
because who can't really relate to people. Because
Right.
this is a people business.
Yes.
We
Yes.
are, we're, and it's about reading people and understanding people, and interpersonal skills are everything in this business. And the best agent, I remember years ago I had a wonderful agent, she's passed away now, but who she could not do a search on the MLS.
Okay.
She didn't know how to do that. Now, she was in a particular town in a suburb here. She owned this town. She knew every property, every person, and everybody wanted to deal with her. But she hired somebody who did the searches for her, but she already knew what properties were on the market and when they've been
Mhm.
sold. She already knew the three people who owned them before and
She was
everything.
her own walking CMA of the town.
Right,
Yeah.
right. And so she figured it out by hiring somebody who's actually now one of our top agents, um, uh, to do it for her, to do that part for her. But she had the relationships. She understood she knew the community cold. Everybody knew, if you're in that community, you need to talk to Sandy. She was the person.
Now, Steve, that's a really important thing that you just said that I want everybody to make sure watching this and hearing this that they get that sometimes we think, oh, I need a better script or I need a better website or I need a better app or I need to learn AI. But you show me somebody that has all of that, but they don't know how to talk to people or build
Right.
relationship with people or get connected with people. They're going to be a failure. So that's the most important piece. It's not the tools, but it's the person and the connection, because we're in a people business, as you said.
So I had an interesting thing coming out of COVID. I was approached by 20 of our top agents who were doing business in Florida. They'd figured out a way because they're clients, and a couple of things I found really interesting about it. One was they wanted to be Baird Warner in Florida, which I liked. And the second thing was their clients were more interested in the relationship with them and going to Florida, even though some of them said to their clients, I don't know anything about Florida, or I don't know about Palm Beach or Miami or wherever they were going. But the client said, no, I want you to go down there and help me find a house. As opposed to them, the person going down there and finding the expert in Palm Beach
Right.
and not having a personal relationship with them. But that was the expert. And it was just interesting to me that that just reinforced and it happens in Chicago. Somebody will be working in a sub-market and they'll go, oh, I'm going to buy a house in this market, which is totally in a different part of the city. And the agent says, I don't know anything about that. And the client says, I don't care. I want you to represent me.
See, now that's another, you've said a lot of important things, but for the agents, I want them to hear that, I want to highlight it, because that's the other thing. Agents, sometimes they get intimidated by, I'm not that top agent in my marketplace. I don't have the success, whatever. But the truth is that people list with people, people buy with people. And if a buyer had a choice between this top successful agent, but they don't like it, they're arrogant, whatever, and they have another agent they can trust their integrity, especially, they're going to choose the agent with the integrity over the successful or agent. So let me ask you, because
it's about the client being comfortable. They feel comfortable with that person.
Absolutely.
And that's really the key. And
Now,
it's about trust and.
So I want to jump to the Realty Alliance. Are you currently the chairman of the Realty
No,
Alliance?
I'm not currently. I was, I don't know, maybe, I don't know, 10 years ago or something.
Yeah. Okay.
I'm a member and I've been very involved for a long time. Great organization.
It's an awesome organization. Let me ask you, because for people that don't know, the Realty Alliance is all these independent firms coming together. And have you seen a common leadership thread in these other brokerages, these successful CEOs, that you would point to, that you relate to?
Yeah, the key for me is I would focus on the word independent. And the ones that are successful, they have a vision, they know what they want to do in their marketplace, and they stick to that. And all the craziness is going on, mergers or whatever, they're still doing their thing. And because they are committed to it, they know what they're doing, they adjust to the marketplace. The ones that have trouble are the ones that keep bouncing around, oh, I need to react to this or I need to react to that. And they don't have a solid view of what am I doing with my business? What am I doing in terms of building my business? Now, listen, I've been through that, and there have been times when I sit down and go, like, are we on the right track here or not? I think you got to do that all the time, but you got to stick to your knitting, so to speak, and be clear about that. And my other view about that is these are the people who are making it happen. They're the most progressive in terms of understanding what's going on in the market because they're in that market every day. They have their finger on the pulse of the marketplace and what needs to happen and what they need to do. Those are the people who are really making it happen and are the most progressive in terms of thinking about how do we change the business? That's where a lot of the new ideas and new ways of doing business. That's what I like about the Realty Alliance, because when you go there, we just came back in April. Every time I go, I hear, something about somebody's doing something in somewhere, and I go, whoa, that's interesting. Maybe we should think about doing that.
Mhm.
So there's all these different ideas. Some of them work, some of them don't, but it makes you think about different ideas.
Mm.
Uh, and I think that it's a real training ground or place for that.
Well, that was. I love what you just said about staying committed to your path, not having the noise on the outside. It's good to listen to it, to assess it, to see if there's some value, but don't let it derail your vision, your own vision, or your own path. All right. So does any so Frank gang that I want to give you guys an opportunity to ask questions. And I know we have the Q&A, and I see we answered one already. But if you guys have any questions for Steve, what I'd like you to do is open up the Q&A as opposed to the chat and write your question in there. While they're starting to think of a question to ask you, Steve, I don't have this on my list of questions, but I feel like maybe you want to comment, and if not, that's fine as well, about what's happening in the industry with national MLS, private listings, CCP. There's a lot of noise there, but I think it's starting to become less of just noise, where it's actually impacting people. And of course, you being in Chicago, this whole MRED Compass and
Yep, yep.
Zillow thing. You want to share any thoughts on that?
Well, how much time do you have? So, but here's what I would say, and is a really um, the most disturbing part to me is I feel we're regressing as an industry in how we're approaching our clients. And the times when we've gotten into problems are when we stop thinking about buyers and sellers. And today, this whole thing about private networks and the MLS and all that stuff, nobody's thinking about the consumer there. They're thinking about what's good for the MLS, what's good for the brokerage, whatever. And a bunch of these things are not good for the consumer. And listen, when this craziness last week that came out with Zillow and everything, you know who we heard from? Consumers. They called us and said, "Why are you doing this?" Da, 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 da. And that's how we got into that, now over $1 billion settlement with NAR and all that company, because we weren't focused on the consumers. And it's always been really interesting to me how the industry gets so internal and thinking about their own things and not thinking about what's best for buyers and sellers.
Did you have any of your listings, any of this, anybody, buyers or sellers, contact you when MRED pulled the feed from Zillow?
Oh yeah.
You did.
The phone's lit up. Like, why aren't we on Zillow? Because the consumer, they don't understand all this stuff. Okay, they don't understand why is this going off. And the other thing is, we you can have your opinion about Zillow, plus or minus, like it, good or bad, but the consumer is on Zillow. They're using Zillow, they're looking at Zillow, okay?
Right.
So we get mixed up with what is the right thing versus where is the consumer at, okay?
Mm-hmm.
So the
Mm-hmm.
consumer, even though you can make a good argument, and it's true in Chicago because the Zestimate is not particularly accurate here because
Right.
of the way we do real estate taxes here. Uh, um, but the consumer thinks it is,
Mm-hmm.
so we need to go where the consumer is and explain why it isn't good or whatever. And we're not doing that. And the other thing, and I think about this whole thing with the private listing networks. There is there is a reason why you would want to put a property on the market while you're preparing it to put it on the public market. But we have had an ethic in the business that once you're putting it out on the market, it goes out everywhere. It's available to everybody.
Mm-hmm.
And that goes back to a long history of discrimination that we've had in our industry.
Mm-hmm.
and had a lot of things. And my father was a big fighter for what at that time was called open occupancy, but it's basically non-discrimination for buyers and sellers. And we're going backwards. And if he was around today, he would be very upset about the fact that, these private networks by their nature are discriminatory.
Mm-hmm.
They're
Mm-hmm.
keeping certain people from seeing all the properties. And so, we'll work our way through this, but the part I don't like is that we're not really thinking of what's good for our clients.
Mm-hmm.
And that should be the bottom line.
I'm glad that I asked you that because when I actually I had a 45-minute Zoom meeting with Robert Refkin yesterday or 2 days ago, and I brought this up to him because I called him out on this, and so he wanted to talk to me, and he told me, he said not one homeowner complained in Chicago because all the brokers had a direct feed to Zillow. So that didn't sound right to me.
No, it's not right.
I'm glad I asked you.
No, it is not correct. That is not correct. And listen, Robert is a great marketer, but he's not being straight.
No,
There's
no.
he's trying to corner the market.
Yep.
And listen, I guess I give him some credit, but he's done a really good job of convincing buyers and sellers that private networks are good. And yeah, actually for a buyer, they're great because if you're in the private network, you got less people competing with.
Right.
If you're a seller, they're not good.
Right.
And I've had people come up to me, oh, I sold my property in this private network and it was great. And I just ask them one question: how do you know you got the best price? And they look at
Yeah.
me, like, what are you talking about? And I said, well, you weren't exposed to the whole market. And often the person who's going to give you the best price is somebody outside the market, who comes in and whatever. And there's no way to know. There's no way to really know because we don't have a comparison of one to the other. But so it's interesting to me because I was thinking about, if you actually accomplish what you want, he's playing right into a significant antitrust issue. So we'll see how it evolves. Now,
Yeah. I've never been so disappointed in or worried or concerned about our industry than I am right now because of this whole private listing thing. And I've written pro private when it's appropriate. A homeowner should have the choice if they want to just, if I want to just give it to Steve, they should have that choice, but they need to be told, I can do that for you, but you're going to sell for less money.
Or you're just explain to them really what the situation is. And I don't disagree with you. That exists in every MLS, some form or another. Pocket listings, there's all been different names. And actually, the number of people who want that situation, you're talking about less than 1%.
Right.
Very small people. We marketed Michael Jordan's house for a while. He would potentially be someone, except when you drew up to the house on the front gate was a big 23. So it's kind of hard to
It's hard to keep that private.
kind of hard to miss it. And everybody knew where he lived and it was on the market and blah blah blah. But no, there are some people, but those are very few people.
Right.
It's really very few. And they've taken that and said, and before there was a private network, there was a way to deal with that. You could have exempt listings.
Mm-hmm.
It's all different and a little different in different marketplaces, but there was a way to do that, and we did that. Now he's taken that and said, okay, well, that's what everybody wants. Well, no, not really.
No, I said, and I did call him out on it. He didn't like it. I said, you can't tell me that 55% of your sellers chose to sell for less money because that's what he said on his stock meeting call with investors, that 55% of all of their listings started off as private listings. in the Compass network. Well, I can't believe 55% homeowners choose to sell for less money and have less exposure. So something's not being said.
Well, it goes back to one of the very first things that I dealt with um, when I took over the company was this. There was a tradition in the business where if you sold an in-house listing, you got a higher commission.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if you remember this.
Oh, yeah.
There
Sure.
was a premium. If you sold an in-house listing, you got a premium.
Yep.
And I looked at this and I said, we're not doing that. How can you go to a seller or a buyer and say, that's fair. I get more if I push this listing over that listing.
Right.
And so I eliminated it. I
Awesome.
got an incredible amount of crap from everybody in the market um, about that, and the company, people in the company said that's terrible. And at that time, 20 or 25% of our listings were that way. And it was only through, that went on to now finally with this lawsuit that we had to put in by our brokerage, which I thought we should have done 30 years ago. Somebody represents the buyer, somebody represents the seller. If you're representing both parties, you can't do that.
It's like an attorney representing both the plaintiff and the defendant. So it's kind of hard to
Yeah,
do.
right. No, you can't do that.
Yeah.
And people say, oh, well, I'm the best person to do that. I said, well, okay, then you need to tell both parties that I can't fully represent you.
Right.
And literally, you should get less on each side. You'll get more overall, but you should get, because you're not fully representing them.
Hmm. Interesting.
So but now that is finally changing. Now we have separate broker agreements and everything nationally. But that was another thing that there was the industry.
All right, I got a few of these questions from some of our people here. So, what's one leadership decision? So, this is an anonymous attendee. Hello, anonymous. What's one leadership decision Baird Warner made during a difficult market shift that you believed helped preserve the company's culture long term, even if it wasn't the easiest financial decision in the short term? Wow, that's a brilliant question.
Well, that's always the lens that I look at, because as I run the company longer, culture is the most important thing.
Mm-hmm.
It's the most important in terms of how we run the company, when we buy companies, all that kind of stuff. So we always look through that lens, but also how do we make it better? I was thinking about 2008 when the market was there, and I look at the downturns in markets a little bit right now, but certainly back at that time. Those are great opportunities because it's much easier to change in a down market
Mm.
than it is in an up market.
Hmm.
First of all, agents are much more willing to listen to you. When things are good, they don't want to change stuff. When things are bad, they go, okay, I understand, we got to do that. So it's easier to change.
Hmm.
Also, it's generally cheaper. It's also harder to do because you don't usually have the same resources that you
Mm-hmm.
did before. But to do 2008, we used that as an opportunity. We completely redesigned all our offices, the physical facilities, made them smaller, and changed from what before them that was just a big sea of desks when you walked in the door,
Okay.
having work areas and conference rooms and all sorts of different things. So creating more light and all sorts of things. Um, but that's the lens. The
Hmm.
lens is always about how does it affect our culture?
That's brilliant. Very great. Larry Atwell asks, how is AI transforming the real estate industry now, and what do you see its effect 5 years from now?
So, my general view about AI is it's a positive thing. Right now we're in kind of the AI, what I call the AI Wild West.
Mm-hmm.
The products are good. They're not always right or correct or whatever, so you got to be careful. They are going to revolutionize behind the scenes, the back office, the processing, and they're going to make it better. We're
Mm-hmm.
already working on this. I think a lot of companies are doing that, taking away a lot of the menial stuff, making the way you do business better. okay, easier, simpler, how you process a transaction, how you process a mortgage, etc. What they are not going to affect um, much is what we talked about before, that interpersonal relationship. You aren't going to be able to use AI to replace your relationship with your buyer or seller.
Absolutely.
That relationship is still there. Now, will AI help you write the description or help the search process or whatever, but it'll help you, but it will not replace the one-on-one. And that's an interesting thing because there have been many attempts over the years to break the relationship between the agent and the client. And you could do a whole session on that. And they haven't been successful. And the reason they haven't been successful is people want to transact with other people.
Mm.
Over 90% of buyers and sellers use an agent. Why is that? They don't need it today. They could go to the internet, they could go to AI, whatever, and buy a house. The technology is there, but they don't do it.
Mm-hmm.
Now they do that for cars, they do it for washing machines, they do it for all sorts of other stuff. Why don't they do it in real estate? Okay, the reason they don't do it as real estate is because of this relationship. And so I feel very strongly that this relationship is the key to our business. And we look at building around that. How can we help agents be better at doing that, give them tools? But we can't replace that interpersonal stuff, the connection.
Beautiful.
We can't replace that.
Beautiful. Janet Livingston, one of our longtime power agents, said, broker in Atlanta and would like to know how to make it easier for buyers and sellers to sell their home and buy a new one. The seller always has so much work to do getting a house ready to put it on the market. So I think that's a big question with a big answer, but quick thoughts on that.
Well, listen, there's the way people live and there's the way people sell. Okay? And we all know that the way people live is not a very saleable thing to buyers. And so, you're going to have to come in and you're going to have to talk to that seller and say, I mean, you know what it is. You got to remove furniture. You got to take out that carpet.
Right.
You got to change the color, whatever. You got to take all your crap out of here because people don't want. And here's the thing: you could have the greatest house, but if somebody walks in and it's dark and too much stuff, they just don't get a good feeling about it. What I say is we sell an emotional connection when somebody connects to a property. And we all, agents know that. They can see that in their buyer, that the buyer goes, and the buyer can be anywhere. They can be in the front yard, they can be in the front hall, they can be in the master bedroom, wherever it is. But if you have the house doesn't feel right inside or whatever, or outside, you're going to miss that opportunity. They're going to go, oh, this doesn't feel right.
Right.
Because most buyers can't project, oh, I can take this out, I can repaint it.
Right.
They don't think about it that way. They want to see it. That's why new construction sells so well, because they know it, they can see it, it's right there. I don't have to do anything. Most people don't want to do any work.
And speaking of that brightness and airiness, I mean, builders will put like 50 hi-hats in one room just to give it that bounce. And of course, they decorate it beautifully.
Yeah.
It's similar to what you said about going into any office and you feel the office or any business where it feels dead or feel that energy is not there. It's the same thing with a house that a buyer walks in and they feel it speaks to their heart is the way I say it. So,
well, that's where they're going to live.
Yeah.
That's where they're going to live.
Yeah.
So they need to have a connection to that.
And,
you don't want to live at a place where you kind of go, this is not that nice and it's dark. And, they want to have that feel. They want to have a positive feel. This is where they live.
I think I like the way you say it better about there's the house we live in and then the house we sell. How I've always said it is there's two houses we live in. It's the house day in and day out, and then there's the house that we live in when company's coming over. It's like exactly. A holiday event. You clean up and make it nice.
Exactly. But even then, there's probably too much stuff in your house for selling.
Yeah.
We know that. I mean, almost all the time, the first thing you do is, okay, we got to move all this stuff out of here.
Right.
You got too much stuff in here.
Yeah. All right, Carol was just making a comment. Carol Pie from, she said, "This is the best conversation I've heard. I love your experience and wisdom. Thank you. I could listen to you for hours." I think she's talking about you, by the way, Steve. Jackie wants to know: is there a telephone number for Steve? So I don't know if people wanted to reach out to you somehow. Is there a way to do that?
Yeah, I would not. I don't like giving out my personal telephone number,
I wouldn't.
but if they want to send me an email and we can connect, it's Steve. It's real simple. It's steve.baird@bairdwarner.com.
Great. And gang, just remind Steve if you do reach out to him that either a power agent or you are on this interview with me, so that way it'll trigger for him. Andrea Quinn, another one of our longtime power agents, said, "What is the primary way that your agents are getting leads? Are they given leads from your company, or is it completely up to them? Or is there a combo?"
Um, there, the answer is twofold. I believe most agents develop their own leads. Okay, however that is. But we are always looking for ways to get what I call wholesale business and then delivered on a retail basis. Relocation is an example like that. We have been in and out of a relationship with Zillow. We are currently out with them, but we have been in their Flex program. That's another example. There are, years ago was American Airlines and their Point program. There's always programs, and we deliver those leads. And but we have an e-business element too, but the great majority develop their own.
Mm-hmm.
That's really about, developing your contact list,
Yep.
your sphere of influence. And, that's where you get. But we have top agents who are big users of Flex or, there's lots of different ones that they use.
Gotcha. All right. Yeah, Janet Livingston was going back to that question about the opening about how to make it like one of your visions and passion was how do we make the industry easier for buyers and sellers, and so I think she was referencing that as well. But Janet, that's a really big, probably generational type of commitment that just moves the needle a little bit every year or so. But all right, well, listen, I just realized the time. Oh my gosh, it went so quick. Is there anything that you would like to add? You know what? I do have really quick. I have so many questions that we could have gotten to, but this was so awesome. I'm going to rapid fire some things really quick. One early habit that made the biggest difference in your career as a leader.
So I would say I guess I don't know how to describe it, stick to itness or not. I was a competitive swimmer in high school and college. And what it taught me was to work really hard. And you didn't always get results, but you kept working and eventually you'd get there. And that sort of hard work ethic has something that's, so I don't give up on stuff very easily. Maybe it's a negative. But I learned that from competitive swimming.
Awesome. One leadership belief that you had to unlearn.
Well, I think I talked to you about that before, that not everybody, you need to get the right person in the right job, and they need to match your culture. And you can have really good, well-intentioned people that just don't fit. They're not good for your company or your management style. And that was a hard one to learn. I always thought, good person, they're going to work. And I found some good people that just didn't fit.
And I found also the opposite is true too. If I find somebody who aligns with our culture and they're great, but they may not seem like they have the talent, well, we'll develop the talent.
Yeah.
And that works for us as well. So, favorite book that you've read?
So this is an interesting one because I don't read. I've always had problems with reading since I was a little kid. I was
Really?
Yes, I read very little, and my company knows if you want to communicate with me and if you write something that's more than one page, it won't get read.
Wow.
And so I read generally one book a year.
Jeez. Well, whoever
And
the first.
that's a developmental issue. I'm just a slow reader processor. Now I married a woman, my wife is a voracious reader. She reads 5 books a week.
Well, then she's your Google Synapse.
Yeah, I want to have a book. I give it to her. I have her read it, and then she tells me.
Well, I'm sure all the professors at Harvard just rolled over in their soon-to-be
Well, you know
graves.
what? I selected. It's why I didn't. I love history, but I knew that I couldn't do history because it was too much reading. So I selected courses based on that variable, how much I could do.
Wow, that's fascinating. Well, there's a motivational message there as well. Favorite movie?
That's easy. Doctor Strangelove.
Okay, all right, good.
Old movie, but just my classic favorite.
Awesome. Favorite expression or motto?
Well, it's what we have in the company, which is do the right thing. And do the right thing is rarely about money.
Absolutely, love that. And that was my that's my uncle's favorite. Do the right. He would always say, "Do the right thing." So with that little Italian push
Well,
on it.
and my wife says to me, "Well, how do you know?" And I said, "If you don't know, that's a problem.
Wow.
If you
Well,
don't
look.
know."
Well, look at you. At least she's reading the 5 books a year. All right. All right. Well, Steve, if there was one thing that you could give people now, like because of all the challenges that we're experiencing, and like if you were going to say one thing to agents who are questioning the industry or questioning themselves or concerned about where we're heading, what would you say to them?
I say the same thing to them all the time. You need to focus on your clients. Your clients are going to tell you what they need and what they want, and talk to them. I sometimes we're afraid to talk to our clients, talk to them about what they like and don't like, how they want to communicate, all that kind of stuff. If you're developing relationships with your clients, you're going to develop that connection, that trust, and they will, if you're not really good at some of the other stuff, they will be fine with that as long as they trust you. That's the
Awesome.
key part. And often agents get all in this other stuff and TikTok and social media and all that stuff, and they don't do this part. And if they just did this part, they're going to be successful.
Awesome. And Sarah, thanks for doing that. I forgot to mention that before we sign off. Gang, if you wouldn't, Steve carved out his time to do this for us. Could you just tell him what you thought? And if you got some value from this, that because I'd like to send him your comments in the chat, so that way he knows the difference that he made. I want to thank you again, Steve, for contributing to my career, and but more importantly, doing this. I know how busy you are, and this was great. You made a difference today, so thank you so very much. Appreciate it.
Good. Well, this was fun. Enjoyed it.
All right. Well, thank you, sir. I will let you go. Everybody, please stay safe, stay focused, and don't forget to keep smiling. Bye, everybody.
Okay. Thanks.